Yay, we're live. Hello,
We're
Faith.
back.
How are you?
Hi, Oscar. Good evening. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. I'm good. It's so good to be alive and here again for day three of
Mhm.
the Africa Challenge. How are you feeling today?
And grand finale. I feel good. I feel great. I feel like it should have actually gone on for a week because it feels like no matter how much we try to cover today, um, it still
Okay.
wouldn't do justice to all the projects that need to be, all the conversations that need to be had, and all the projects that need.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me, if I'm losing you. Okay, maybe it's the internet most likely. Yeah. But yeah, this is day three of the Africa Challenge. Evolve Africa, and really, really exciting to be here with everyone on the live stream. Today, we're going to be having some very exciting conversations. We're going to have two conversations today, unlike the other days where we just had one. Fit is back. Yes,
Yeah.
we see you.
Exactly. Sorry about that.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
I'm back. So yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited, and yeah, I'm looking forward to all the conversations we're going to have today. And if anyone hasn't been following the conversation from the get go, I'd really recommend that you get to see, all we talked about on Wednesday and on Thursday. Those were power packed projects, power packed conversations, and I think to get the most of it is going to be really awesome if you go back to review those as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. I was also just telling everyone, like today we're having two sessions on like the previous days, where we just had one, because this year we were like, okay, let's not. It's not just about the talks or the conversation or the talks. Basically, let's have more conversation with real life case studies of things that are actually going on there. And today I'm actually excited, very excited, because we're touching on two topics that I do have my own personal opinion on, but then I'd love to see the speakers come talk about it, share their own views, which is going to be amazing. And that's on accessibility. This is something that I know a lot of us don't even have an idea about. a, lot, a lot of us are not working on currently, but it's very key. Like I say, I get frustrated sometimes because it looks like sometimes we're solving problems of like 50, 100 years ago, whereas there are real life issues that need tackling. You want to say something?
Well, if we're solving problems of 50 years ago, it's because we have problems of 50 years ago and we have to solve
True,
them. So
true.
I feel like we have the double burden down. That's a different conversation. But I feel like Africa is faced with the double burden of handling, problems of 50 years ago and problems of now. So we now have to tackle all of those together. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I know there are a lot of upcoming issues that we should focus on. But I mean, don't say that. We're doing our
Okay.
best.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not judging. I'm not judging. I'm not judging at all. So we have our speakers in the building already. Let's bring the first one. It's Promise Okoro, a Nigerian who is an accessibility expert. He's a digital accessibility specialist. I believe that's
Mm.
how it calls himself. Let's bring him on stage. And let me see. I'm trying to do that drum round
Drum
of
roll.
applause.
Exactly.
Drum roll. Drum roll. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Woo! Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
just left this thing yesterday, so don't blame us.
Yeah,
The
we have
Lord.
to use it. I mean, but
Thank
hi,
you.
Promise. Hello. Thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
very
It's
much.
really amazing to have you, on board with
Thank
us here today. And digital um
Accessibility.
accessibility.
ability
Yeah.
Yeah.
specialist. What is that? I mean, I think I'm not the only one who's hearing that particular title for the first time. I mean, if you're also hearing it for the first time, please indicate so I don't feel like I'm the only one who's hearing it. Exactly. Thank you, Oscar. Yeah,
Right.
what exactly is that? What exactly do you do?
Okay. Well, I would say when you talk about digital accessibility, of course, we are talking about removing those barriers that we find by mainly by design. Okay, by our design choices, we find these barriers in online platforms, our online websites, our games, our apps, our documents these are barriers that stop some persons with disabilities from accessing or being able to navigate these contents independently. So digital accessibility is all about making sure that there is one internet for everyone, regardless of their ability or disabilities. So that is what we do, digital accessibility.
Wow.
That is mind. And
Yeah.
my mind is going in so many directions. My mind is going in so many directions because I remember a film festival that was held mid last year, and
All right.
it was a film for African Voices of Change, something like that. And the film was spotlighting the challenges of people living with disabilities. And
All
unfortunately,
right.
there wasn't enough intentionality to capture people with visual impairments during the film screening. So they were right there, but they couldn't experience the films that were being screened. So I believe that is an area that you cover as well. So just off the bat, what does this mean for people with visual impairments, hearing impairments as well?
Well, for persons with visual impairments and definitely also those with hearing impairments, but I'll first talk about the visual impairments. It means that you are building your solutions to make sure that the technologies that they are using, technologies like screen readers, are being able to capture this. And these are basic things you just need to do, by making sure that your HTML tagging is correct and using, area labels when you have to, and just making sure that what you are building is compatible with screen readers. So this just making doing these simple things are enough to make those persons that have visual impairments to be able to access the content or the products that you're building.
Yeah, like live caption readings. I've seen that recently. I think on TikTok, where
Right.
there's like an AI reading the
Yeah.
summary while the video is playing. That
Yeah.
is
Right.
so. It's something
Okay.
that um.
Yeah, yeah. He's already spilling everything. I know he has a presentation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can, because Faith is in the medical field actually. She has a background in the medical
Yeah.
field. Yeah, I don't know if it's
I was
medical
about to
science
dig
field.
in. I was about to dig in.
Yeah.
But thank you
So,
for cutting me off.
but let's have him do the presentation, and then we can then come back. At least give us, you've planned something, let's hear everything about this, and then we can then come on with more questions. So I'll pull
Definitely.
it up. Yes. Can you see the screen? Yes, we can see it. It's live up there right now. Over
Okay.
to you, Promise. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Promise Okoro, as Michael said, and I am a digital accessibility specialist. And this is something I've been doing for about 3 years, actually, since I think 2021. And I get the question, why did you choose digital accessibility? Obviously, this is not a thriving or popular field in Nigeria or Africa at large. But I think one of the reasons that brought about my decision to go into accessibility was basically a period where I experienced temporary mobility disability, and then I was just about to finish my coursework in school, and I just realized that I couldn't get anything done. The school couldn't arrange some sort of product exam for me, and it was just the environment was just disabling. So at that point, I was trying to start up a career as a data analyst, of course, and I just kind of did a whole 360 turn. I just couldn't continue with that. So that is my background, and since then, I have been building in accessibility. I'm currently working with an NGO, Avaya Fees, based off in the US, and yep, that's for me. So to the work for today. So I want to welcome everybody again to today's section. I'm talking about accessibility in gaming design, and I've decided to break this down into the what, the why, and the how. Okay, so when we talk about gaming accessibility, it's not just about compliance. Some persons just think it's about checking some boxes. It's about fundamentally transforming how we think about inclusive design and ensuring that the joy, excitement, and community of gaming is available to everyone, regardless of their abilities or, in this case, their disabilities. So today we are going to be going through these three critical areas: the what accessibility in gaming is, the why you should implement accessibility, and the how you are going to go about all of this. Okay, so as I said, I just wanted to outline, what we have going on today. And under the words, we are going to be defining the accessibility in gaming, who we are designing for, and what's preventing inclusive gaming. And the why, we'll talk about why accessibility makes business sense. Every time we talk about accessibility, we get a whole lot of questions on whether it's a need to have or just a basic nice to have. But now we are going to be living the moral imperishon, the moral aspect of it, and talk about the business aspect of it. And next, we'll talk about the how. We'll talk about how accessibility benefits everyone, including, the persons that do not think accessibility benefits them. We'll talk about the must-have features for inclusive gaming. We'll talk about how you ensure that your solutions are working, and we'll talk about how accessibility. We'll talk about the organizations or the games that are doing accessibility right. Okay. So I think we will start with a very fundamental question. What exactly is accessibility in gaming? Okay, and at its core, gaming accessibility is about removing barriers that prevent people from fully participating in and enjoying gaming experience. So I think you notice when I said removing barriers, okay? Because this is crucial because it shifts our focus from the person's disability to the design choices we are making. Okay, so the definition you see here emphasizes the widest range of abilities and disabilities. Because I always try to tell people disabilities exist on a spectrum, okay? It's not binary, it's not simply someone is disabled or somebody is not disabled. It's a wide range of, a spectrum where people can have multiple disabilities. So the key principle I want you to get from this is that you have to remember that we are not trying to make separate games for, people with disabilities. We are trying to make games that everyone can play. So this approach, I'm sure, most designers, most developers already know the universal design approach. So the universal design approach basically recognizes that when we design for people with disabilities, we often create solutions that basically benefits everyone. So I often get the questions, who are we designing for? Okay, and to design inclusively, we need to understand that we need to understand the diverse range of people who want to play our games. Okay, and I try to break this down into, a category, four category here. However, I want us to keep in mind that people have multiple disabilities. Okay, and there are conditions that don't fit neatly into these categories. So while I'm breaking this down into categories, as I said earlier, disabilities exist on a spectrum. Some persons have multiple disabilities and conditions that are not just fitting into this, you know, four boxes. Okay, some of them have multiple. So first we see visual impairment. So we are designing for people that are blind, probably completely blind or not having their full vision, low vision. We are designing for people that are colorblind and people that are light sensitive. Many people with visual impairments love to game. They use screen readers, they use high contrast displays, they use magnifying softwares, and we are designing for these people. Also, we are designing for people with auditory impairments. Okay, and we are talking about people that are deaf, people that are having hearing losses, also people with auditory processing disorders. The next group of persons we are designing for are people with motor impairment, and this involves limited mobility, reduced dexterity, single hand use, or conditions causing tremors or spasms. And you see that some of these gamers, they use specialized controllers, while others need modified button layouts or timing adjustments. Also, cognitive differences. This is something that is not being spoken about enough because research will show you that a lot of players in a high level, like a high number of percentage of persons with disabilities have cognitive differences, learning disabilities, attention disorders, memory impairments that they need different type of accommodations for. So we have to remember that these categories overlap, and sometimes someone can experience temporary impairments due to injury, medications, or situational factors. Okay, what prevents inclusive gaming? Okay, now I want us to examine the barriers that would prevent people from fully enjoying gaming experiences. Understanding these barriers, I would say, is crucial because most times they are not. It's not like we are looking to put these barriers in. Okay, these are unintentional consequences of our design decisions. They are not deliberate from us. We are not trying to build without accessibility. Okay, we just don't know enough. So as I did before, I'm still continuing with the category just so it's easy to break down. But keep in mind, as I've always say, that disabilities and accessibility as a whole is not a one shoe fits all size. No, is a spectrum. Okay. So visual barriers are perhaps the most common accessibility issues in gaming. Okay. And you see that in small tests that cannot be resized. We have that in poor color contrast, that can make some of your interface elements invisible to some users. And you can find that in the lack of alternative tests for important visual information. All of these are going to create significant obstacles for persons that are visually impaired. Another thing is flashing light. This is something that we often ignore mostly, okay? And without proper warning, when you have lights that flash, unusually, this can cause seizure in people with photosensitive epilepsy. Next, we have the audio barriers, and this occurs when you have critical game information and you're conveying these informations using sound only. Okay, so imagine when you are trying to play a game and you just cannot hear enemy's footstep or you just can't hear important dialogues. That's how it feels like. So when you are missing captions, you don't just affect deaf players, okay? You also impact anybody who is playing in, say, a noisy environment or someone who is just learning the language that your game is programmed in. Background noises are also, you know, obstacles, that barriers that we can find in our gaming decisions. And sometimes we have background noises that overwhelm the dialogue, that and it creates challenges for people with auditory processing disorders. Next, we have the motor barriers, and this often stems from an assumption that every player is interacting with the game the way you expect most players to interact with it. And you see things like complex button combinations, precise timing requirements, and basically the inability to customize controls to make their gaming experience better. Next, we have cognitive barriers, and this includes overly complex menu systems, information overload, and the inability to save, progress, or pause during critical moments. And all these barriers I've just listed out here, they are not just the only barriers, but they are the most common ones that we find, in our gaming designs these days. So, we just have to keep in mind what this is, and so that we can know how to move forward with that. So next, I will get to the why accessibility makes business sense. Of course, a whole lot of times I've spoken with a lot of persons, and every time I talk about accessibility, they come up with the is it a need to have, is it nice to have? So beyond the moral imperative, of course, accessibility it presents a compelling business opportunity across multiple dimensions. Okay, and I would say market expansion is the most obvious benefit. Okay, so when you are making your game accessible, you are literally expanding your addressable market by millions of potential players. Yeah, and it just goes beyond numbers or anything. Accessible games often see higher player retention rates, basically, because when you create more satisfying experience for all users, players will appreciate having control and options over their gaming experience, and you will see that you get to have more player retention in your gaming. Accessibility features also drive innovation in unexpected ways, I would say. You know, and let me see. Most of the mainstream gaming innovations that we have today have originated from accessibility research. And you can name them from voice control, from haptic feedback, simplified control schemes. All of these have all originated from, people trying to design for accessibility. Okay. And we have risk mitigation. Of course, I don't know if this really applies a lot to Africans. Okay, but of course, if you are building your game, I'm sure you are looking forward to a global audience. So you have to be building with accessibility in mind, of course. Cost effective. Of course, your accessibility. This is a very intriguing argument. Actually, a lot of persons are will ask the question: what is the cost implication of building with accessibility in mind? And the truth is, where you have a whole lot of cost implication is when you build without accessibility in mind, and you try to retrofix or you try to remediate an existing problem. That's when you have, these issues. Because research has shown that when you build with accessibility from the scratch, you often just require maybe about 5% or less additional development efforts. So, the, I mean, when you think about it and you realize how much more it will cost you when you're trying to retrofix these issues, I think building from the scratch is something that makes more sense. Okay, so let's talk about the numbers. Of course, we are most persons here, science, and so people want to see the numbers. They just don't want you to talk about anything without numbers. So yeah, you see, these numbers don't just represent opportunities. They show you what can be done. Okay, and you can see that there are over 1 billion persons worldwide with disabilities, and this is 15% of the global population. Okay, and according to Newzoo, 31% of gamers have accessibility needs, have disabilities rather, and mental health, in line with cognitive differences, has been identified as the most reported disability among gamers. Also, Africa has a market size of about 2.4 billion US dollars in annual spending power in the gaming sector alone. Okay, and that sounds like, a lot of money to me. And you realize that some of this revenue, sometimes they are often left on the table due to accessibility barriers. And perhaps for me, one of the most striking in this is the fact that 20% of gamers have reported that they have accessibility needs. Okay, and this is both, we're talking about both permanent disabilities or temporary disabilities, and also situational limitations. And when you think about this, I want you to put it in perspective. Okay, maybe you're a new developer and you have 100,000 players. Statistically, 20,000 of these players, of them, could benefit from you building with accessibility in mind. So if you're designing a game and you're not considering accessibility, you are potentially excluding almost a quarter, of your potential audience. And as I said earlier, this is not just statistics, it's not just abstract numbers. This represents real people, and they want to play your game and they have disposable income, okay? And they are currently underserved by the gaming industry as far as that goes. Yeah. And one thing you should also note is that most of these persons are loyal to brands that serve them well. So if you are not already doing it, you should be considering doing that. Okay, next we will talk about how accessibility benefits everybody. One of the most powerful arguments for accessibility is understanding how accessible designs, create better experience for all users. And when I say all users, I'm not just talking about just those with disabilities. Okay, and we often come across the concept of situational disabilities. And this, I'll use some examples to help illustrate this point, as you can see in the slide. And with visual impairment, I want you to think about yourself. Maybe you don't believe you are not somebody who identifies as a person with disability. So imagine when you are walking on the road while in under bright sunlight, you realize that suddenly things like high color contrast, options and larger text becomes essential for you to. Okay, so this is an example of where you people can experience situational visual disabilities. Okay, and also, when we talk about situational auditory disabilities, you can find yourself in a noisy environment, a noisy shop, and you just want to play your game, okay? And this is where captions are crucial for everybody, regardless of how you feel about yourself at that point. And this also applies to motor impairment and cognitive disabilities. For motor impairment, if maybe you are eating with your hand or you're eating while you are gaming and you still want to game. Me personally, I love to game, okay? And I would say I also want to play my game when I'm eating or doing something else. Okay. And at that point, I don't want to stop. You get. So if I have anything stopping me at that point, is going to be a problem for me. So you realize that single hand controls and some of these innovations that we have built with accessibility in mind comes in play for everybody at this point. And when you think about cognitive disabilities, of course, multitasking, people can use people can get things done when they have simplified interface and some other accessibility features that are built for people with cognitive differences. Also, we know that accessibility in gaming, as I've earlier said, enhances the user experience for everybody basically. And when you have clearer interface, everybody benefits from that. When you can customize your input methods, everybody is going to be using that. So your better design patterns will definitely image has definitely imaged. I don't want to use the word will because right now this is already in motion. Better design, has already emerged from accessibility. So accessibility is not just geared towards the moral aspect where you're thinking about persons with disability. You should be thinking about yourself too. You should be thinking about your when you experience situational disability, you should be thinking about when you experience changing abilities. We are all gonna get older, okay? And I don't think you want to stop playing your favorite games just because you've gotten a bit older. So you realize that the older you get, the more your abilities change, okay? And you just want to make sure that what you're building accommodates all of that. So let's dive into what I'll say specific features that can form the foundation of accessible gaming experience. Okay, and while I have a few features listed here, I want to I think it's important to state that you don't have to do everything at once. Okay, you just have to be making a difference. You have to be building. You have to focus on the small wins. We don't expect you to try and make. I mean, there's no 100% accessibility. That's the truth. Okay, we just expect that you are building something that, and you are keeping accessibility in mind. So don't try to overwhelm yourself by trying to implement everything at the go. Okay, you just have to start somewhere, and that's what we expect from you as designers and developers. So as I've done, I keep trying to break this down into categories: visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive accessibility. Okay. And for visual accessibility, one of the things you want to be doing is having adjustable text size and contrast. Okay, you want to have colorblind friendly palettes for your design, and you want your products to be compatible with screen readers. And this involves providing alternative text for images, proper labeling for interface elements, and basically making sure that you have logical navigation order for those that want to interact using keyboard only. Audio accessibility is another one of those. One of the things you have to be doing here is to make sure you have comprehensive subtitles and captions for your videos and visual representation of sounds. This is something that I think a lot of persons don't pay attention to. You can provide visual representation for sound using animations or UI elements or particle effects, just anything. Make sure you are putting your sounds out there so that persons who cannot perceive that sound have alternative ways to get the idea of what you are communicating. Next, we have motor accessibility. Of course, one of the basic, most important features you want to have is to give the gamer the ability to customize their control, their input methods. Also, button remapping, as we said, difficulty adjustment options. These are things you can do, for to increase or improve your motor accessibility in your gaming products. Cognitive accessibility too. We have the clear navigation and menus. Of course, you have to make sure that you are putting out simplified things that don't cause a whole lot of cognitive overload when people are trying to navigate them. Also, you keep your consistent your what I think I would say your pages or whatever that is at that point. You want to make sure that you have consistent interface pattern. You don't want to be changing things up. That can be a form of cognitive overload for persons with cognitive difference. And persons should be able to save and pause functionalities anywhere in your game to accommodate players who need breaks or have attention challenges. And also, you provide comprehensive tutorials and help systems to help people to learn how to use the game that you are making. Finally, when you have implemented some of these accessibility features, you want to ensure that your solutions are working. Okay. And of course, testing and validation, they are crucial to ensuring that your implementations actually work in practice, not just in theory. Okay. And a comprehensive testing strategy is going to combine a whole lot of automated testing, manual testing, real world user feedback. And you want to check to make sure that these metrics, some metrics and sources, are working to make sure that all you have done in practice is actually being converted to real world solutions. Okay. And for automated testing, there are a lot of things you can do from color contrast verification, screen reader compatibility, keyboard navigation flows, UI scaling test. You want to make sure that screen readers can basically work with some of these solutions that you have put in place. You want to make sure that your UI scaling, when you scale your zoom levels at different zoom levels and display configurations, basically that your product is still being accessible to everyone. And when you're done with that, you should be moving to manual testing because, of course, automated testing can only catch certain types of issues. We always try to emphasize this. A whole lot of persons think, when you're done with building, you just do the work with some of these new tools, some of these new AI tools that are just coming out, but that's not the case. You have to also come to manual testing. And this is the point where you definitely need, accessibility specialists, or if you're one yourself, you could do that. So manual testing will fill this gap. You can have your team members to actually use your game with assistive technology. They can play your game with screen readers to understand the experience for blind users. You can navigate using the keyboard to identify interaction barriers. You can test with different input methods to understand motor accessibility challenges. And you can verify that all content is perceivable through multiple senses. Okay. And next, this is very important, very crucial. You cannot replace this point. You have to test with real world users. And when we are talking about real world users, you're talking about people with actual disabilities, and you gather detailed feedback from these people and you iterate over and make sure that you are building based on their feedback. Finally, matrices and sources measurement will help you to understand the impact of your accessibility efforts because you have to track player retention rates among users, especially among users who enable accessibility features. You can monitor the accessibility feature usage to understand, which features are actually most valuable among these users, and you measure support tickets reduction related to accessibility issues. And finally, you can also survey player satisfaction scores, particularly among users who identify themselves as having disabilities.
Wow, that has been really exciting. Yeah, these
Thank
are
you.
some examples of accessibility done right. Right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've, over the years, of
Interesting.
course, we have some games that are doing it right. And, as developers, as designers, as project managers too, we can also pick leaves from some of these games. We have The Last of Us, we have Forza Horizon series, we have Minecraft, we have Sea of Thieves. These games have gone above and beyond as far as accessibility is concerned. So you can see a whole lot of what they are doing. The Last of Us implemented over 60 plus accessibility options. Innovation. They won an innovation in accessibility award, and we for the first time in I think as much as we can remember, blind players could actually complete an action packed game from start to finish. So these are milestones. These are things that we are taught to not be possible before, but you see organizations are doing it, and
Yeah.
they are getting rewarded for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, that looks amazing. I mean, just while you were speaking, I just got to think more about inclusivity in games. I mean, I'm just
Right.
realizing that there are actually some audio only games for people who are completely visually impaired, and that is so thoughtful. I consider that so thoughtful and empathic, and I love that
Right.
there's representation and like people are actually pushing to represent these people to ensure that these people have the same experiences, not the same, but at least experience these games
Yeah.
to the best of their capacities. We can't just sideline them because they do not have the visual capacities to see them. And also for those who are, uh, impaired have hearing impairments and audio impairments, having this visual incompare, like you mentioned, color contrast in the games, having screen readers, having what was that other thing, um was it UI descriptions, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. You want to make
yeah,
sure you have
yeah,
descriptions.
it makes the whole game, it makes the whole project very immersive. But I do want
Right,
to ask, I mean, outside games, I know that you have spoken quite extensively on how games can be more inclusive. I want to know, how do you push this? How are you pushing this education? Because this is a gold mine, like you mentioned. There are so many people who are being segregated, cast away because they cannot access these games that are made in these particular ways for people who have these capacities. So how are you
right.
pushing, how are you pushing education, basically? How are you pushing enlightenment to gaming devs communities, animators communities? How has that been so far? How has it been going?
Well, I thank you very much for that. As you said, I mean, me being here should be, a
Exactly.
testament to so that
I
is something
mean,
to that is not easy when you speak with persons, especially in this part of the world. You realize that there is a complete ignorance, and people have to have the willingness, the open-mindedness to want to learn. That's the first approach. Most times when you speak to persons, they are not really giving you what you want. They don't want to even listen. But
they're
of
not
course,
interested.
using my right. Of course, I'm using my platform on LinkedIn, and I'm also working with an organization that is passionate about accessibility. So yes, that is what I'm doing, in that regard.
Yeah, that is good work. That is good work. But I know that there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, especially when it comes to inclusivity. Especially, and while you were speaking, I just cast my mind back to animations and you know all these animations that people watch, and I realized that there are animators who'd put so much effort into visual graphics, and there's not so much effort put into the audio, the voice distinction. You know how voices embody the character, right? So that people who
Right,
may be visually impaired can have a very good imagination. They can have, they can see it, right, even if they're not seeing
right,
it. Because you know what I'm talking about. There are videos you watch, and even if your eyes are closed, you can kind of imagine what they look like when they're having that dialogue, right? So a lot of people don't
right.
put so much in yeah, this needs to be pushed. I'm saying, I
Thank
I think that this needs to be out there with game devs, and not just game developers. I think that you could broaden your scope to animators as well, people who make all
you.
these short skits and all of that. Everyone needs to know this, because at the end of the day, it's a shared responsibility. It's not one person's responsibility. It's all of our responsibilities to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, to bring the general population into what we're doing and to experience the things we've been experiencing. Yeah, but yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you very
thank you
much.
so much for this. And for everyone who's looking to learn more about this, of course, this is a new topic even for us at Africa Communicate.
It
It was
Right.
a
is.
huge pleasure to get connected to Promise, and I've been learning. I know it's not at the forefront of what every game developer or creative is looking at, but then, like I said, let's start solving current problems, right? Let's
Mm.
not be stuck with our old school way of doing things.
Yeah.
This is something, if you are interested, you can actually reach out to Promise. And we're going to have more conversations because this was the eAfrica challenge. We said, let's kickstart this conversation from here. But we'll be looking to have much more workshops where even game developers come together and it's interactive. We're going to promote this session very much. And because this is something unique and it's very important. And if you want to continue the conversation with him, feel free to connect with him on
Thank you.
LinkedIn. So, Promise, any final word for every creator out there building something? What would you have to say? Yeah, as a final closing note.
Okay. I mean, one of the things I want to say is that a lot of persons talk about accessibility limiting their creativity, but we have seen from examples of those organizations that are doing it right that this is not the case. Also, I want you to keep in mind that accessibility is not there's no destination. Okay, it's a journey, and you just have to focus on building and putting the right things one after the other. You don't have to try and do everything at once. You just have
True.
to be making those steps. And as long as you are trying to do it, I'm sure you are making a difference in one person's life, and that's what matters.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us. I do
Thank you
have
very much,
a
Jimmy.
lovely evening. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you so much,
thank you,
Promise.
thank you. Have a good one.
You
Yeah.
too. Wow, that was interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
a lot as
Wow.
well. Like I thought I was in a lecture room. Like, okay,
It sounds
this
very
is
much like a
like
lecture, but
accessibility. This is the effect, and then he brought so much data, and I was
he
like,
got
I
so
was
much
looking. I
data
love
and
this
so much
number slide.
information.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. No, he came with facts. It's making us see that this is actually something that has been well researched. It's not just someone making up hula baloo. Like this,
exactly.
yeah. I don't want to say, well, I mean,
Okay.
I love that their stories are being told and they're pushing for his, like he's just embodying that and being so altruistic. It's really great to see that.
Okay then. Yeah. We'll see. We'll definitely move the conversation forward. This is just the
Yeah.
beginning. We'll see
Mm.
how we can get more people into this to learn about this and see how we can be a part of it as well. Now we're going to our next session, which is talking about it's going to be focusing around game jams and how game jams as a tool for innovation, creativity can also be used for creating social change, impact, activism, and so much more. And we have a very packed panel. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to call them on board. And they created a game jam for climate change. No, I don't think I'm saying it right. I think it's climate justice. And they're going to be telling us all about it, as well as their learnings, how they put together why they are doing this, and what they expect to come out of this. And so, with that, I'll bring on board our panelist for the next session. Yes, is our panelists for the next session. Let's welcome them. Zulizi, Keran, and Zama Yusfa. Ah, no, 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 my drum roll. Yes,
Yeah, drum rolls and applause. You have to use them.
Greetings, greetings.
yes. Good evening. Good evening.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. I know it's really late on your end. This should be like 10 o'clock, 11 in South Africa, right?
Yep.
You're close to 10.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us. Where are you here? We're live from Lagos, Nigeria. So it's about 9 p.m. right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I know people are joining since this is live stream and a lot of people. But firstly, let's see. Let's get to meet you all. We can start with Nzalisi, some quick introductions.
Greetings, community. Pleased to share the platform and be part of the forum. My name is Mxolisi Xaba. I'm a creative cultural industries practitioner serving in various game industry roles for the purpose of guiding stakeholders through complexities of the African gaming landscape, ensuring that they have the tools, information, and resources to make decisions and thrive. With a passion and purpose for creativity and social impact, I strive to facilitate opportunities for diverse voices and actors in the gaming community, thereby architecting and promoting a more equitable, productive industry.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. Kiran, can we meet you?
Sure. I'm far less eloquent than Mkolisi, but I was a former lecturer, so I like to call myself a recovering academic. I've taught game design for a decade plus, and now I run a company called Two Name Games, and we do playful solutions and playful development and everything related to play. And I've been a mentor in the game jam, and I'm also the one of the main organizers of the campus game jam, which is a game jam we do annually for students at South African institutions. So, and it's really great to be here. All the work you guys do is super cool, and it's really nice to have to be on.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And yes, the campus game jam. I saw it. I know there is currently one that is coming up. I would share
Yeah.
that before the end of this session. Super. Yes. Yes. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. I'm
Okay, I think you're
Zamanyuswa.
muted. Now you're the one that is muted. Yay, not just me.
No, I'm not muted. Can everybody hear me? Okay, excellent. I'm Zamanyuswa Nuswa. I'm a
Okay.
journalist and communications practitioner. And in essence, my role in this game jam is to make sure that everybody knows about it.
Seems we've lost our hosts.
It seems that way. I think we'll just give them a few moments to reconnect.
Sure.
Uh, Perhaps while we wait, Mpolisi, you can just give us a little bit of a background about the Mzansi Climate Justice Game Jam.
Okay, with that said, I'll then take the opportunity to do it the Mzansi Climate Justice Game Jam way and go through and share a few slides with colleagues.
Okay.
But I won't do it in the conventional way. I'll do it from back to front. And with that said, I would like to then extend a thank you to Michael, to Africa Communicate, for having us on their platform and speaking to their audience and communities. And with that said, um, we are collaborators as well as organizers of the Mzansi Climate Justice Game Jam, a game jam which predominantly is presenting the issue of climate justice to an audience that isn't a gaming audience or participants that aren't gaming participants in a sense, in the classical sense. So the game jam in and of itself is different in that it takes place over a period of a month, as well as the participants are drawn from various backgrounds. With that said, as I present the game jam, it'll be a collaborative endeavor. We will engage, we will discuss, we will explore some of the themes that we will bring up. So I'm inviting colleagues as well as yourselves, Michael and Faith, to engage us. The Mzansi Climate Justice Game Jam kicked off on the 30th of May 2025, which is when we onboarded our participants and then embarked on this journey that'll end on the 5th of July. I would like to know from you, Michael, as well as Kieran and Zama, what's your interest in games and climate justice? As we get to know each other, as we discuss the issues, what's your interest in games as well as climate justice?
I'll take that up first. My interest in games, I think, was fairly novice, but with climate justice, more on the effects of feeling the various changes in weather and certain side effects that come from that. The combination of the two wasn't something that I had initially thought of. So, this concept for me was very interesting in that. Uh, Putting what I believe to be a very real, tangible issue into a game format, I thought would be very interesting and engaging to avid gamers, which we all know is now quite a lot of people.
The question over to you, Michael. If you were to consider the interest that you have in the relationship between games and climate justice, especially considering your background, what would that be?
Yeah, well, for me, it's going to be that the fact that games are a very powerful medium, just like novels, like movies, like animation. They are the go to medium today for a lot of Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, even millennials as well, if we're being sincere. And there's a whole lot of passive learning that can be done through games. And the issue with climate change is something we are living in. right? I know there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of uncertainties, and yeah, surrounding the whole idea of climate change, but we're experiencing it, we're living it. In Nigeria, our climate has changed, our weather patterns has
Mm.
changed. So if we also want to pass this information across, from what I know, having been sustainability champion myself in many ways, it's the average African youth is not thinking about solving social
Mm,
issues. They're under a lot of pressure to survive. They want to be entertained. They want to have fun. They want to just survive today, right? To them, they still see things like
mm,
climate change as a
mm,
future problem. So if we want to get this message across, we need to go to them where they are. And that's definitely not in articles or long case studies or PDFs. No, nobody is going to read that. But you can find them on TikTok watching videos.
Mm.
You can find them playing games. And this is the huge correlation between the two.
mm. And when you say that, my particular interest was actually bringing together an eclectic mix of stakeholders and people who could speak to the issues from different vantage points. Um, for instance, we have institutions involved, UCT, University of Cape Town, University of Johannesburg, and Wits University. So we have contributions coming from academia. Then we also have in our midst um, students and learners who have a different perspective in terms of the generational mix of what climate justice and how climate justice has impacted them. But in certain instances, we're not even talking about climate justice, we're talking about climate
Mm.
injustice, that experience. Then we also go to the issue of just energy transition, which we're struggling with as a country. And then the use of games. One of the things that I've explored, for instance, is what happens with the just aspect around play and games if electricity is the primary energy source through which we then access digital games. And if digital games are now the dominant form of play and games, how does that then feature and factor into just energy transition? But with that said, um, I also would like to bring Kieran into the discussion, especially in terms of Kieran's background and his new venture at Two Name Games.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I'm drawn to game jams because I love games. In a first and foremost, you can see behind me, I'm an avid board gamer, and I really believe that kind of play is everything. But it's really so interesting. And Michael, what you're saying about that kind of passive learning and that ways of engaging. What's been so great to see in the game jam is people just learning through play and learning through kind of just doing the thing, right? And actually getting your hands dirty and being involved, and as soon as you create, as soon as you make, you start to think in different ways and you start to engage in different ways. And it's been really exciting to see that happen. And in fact, today we ran a workshop about climate change, and we used Lego. And everyone started building their kind of little pieces of how they imagine collaborating to tackle climate change. And it was so great to see because play, games, toys, all of them are equalizers. So we had CEOs from big companies sitting next to a second year student and they were just building Lego together. And I've seen the same thing in the Justice Jam and in all the jams. It's such an equalizer. It's really like, there you are, you're making something cool. The person next to you is making something cool and you're just doing it together. And you're thinking differently, and we're really excited to see the artifacts that they produce thereafter. But even if they're not great, I know that the process for each participant has been changing, right? And that's really where the value is. It's how they've changed through creation and through play.
Faith, would you like to make a contribution? With that said, then the next thing I'd like to invite our audience to do, as well as colleagues on the panel, is actually then consider what their earliest memory of being aware of the weather is, and what sensory experiences have they engaged through in terms of interacting with climate change.
So
I'll step up
I can
once.
jump.
No problem. So for me, I think my earliest memory of weather. South Africa is not a country that generally gets snow, but I remember a snow day when I was in high school, and I
Mm,
felt completely unprepared because I was freezing, but should have been dressed considering what is normally winter. It just so happened as well that I kind of locked myself outside the house that day. So I suffered quite a bit. So it's like I knew one thing for sure was I do not like the cold and I don't know why it's snowing. I'm not happy about this. Even though for everybody else it was a memorable, like a fun, memorable snow day, for me it was just hell. And when it comes to my sensory experience of climate change, I'm I'm really quite aware of the extremities in the weather that we have now. And
Mm,
also what I know to be the time frame of our seasons and how it seems like a winter is delayed, where it should be we're moving into
mm,
spring, we're still in winter. The extremities of the insane heat waves and the really bitterly cold snaps in our seasons. So for me, those are very tangible things, but also having been on Earth quite a while, there's what I used to know and what we're having. That's been the biggest ones for me.
mm. I actually when I think about the sensory experience, I think about where I come from, and I come from what is termed a township in South Africa, and I remember the winters and what happens during winter, the burning of coal, fog, smoke, the risks that are then taken in having to keep warm, and then the multiple fires that otherwise would then occur. So what I've found is that that has increased. It's increased to the extent whereas it's no longer the preserve of townships. It even now happens in our cities. In
mm,
Johannesburg, buildings are burning down because of the changes in terms of weather. But the other factor then also speaks to some of the historical elements around South Africa's history in terms of populations finding themselves in locations that adequate planning was not done for, and therefore they actually are suffering the consequences of an unjust past in the here and now today. So when I think about climate justice or climate injustice, I realize that it's linked to the past and we're living it today. And in South Africa's case, there are elements of having to have to confront that. But
mm,
also, when you think about the macroeconomics of it, the global south, global north dynamics, there's also factors there to be considered. So, there's really quite a lot to unpack when we reflect on the experiences that one has when confronted with the theme of climate justice. In Nigeria, what in terms of changes, I think you had floods 2 weeks ago. Am I mistaken, Michael? I think I heard it in the news.
Yeah, for floods, I mean, there's been a couple lately. the climate change, the what do they call them, the dams, and also like
Mm,
irrigation farm practices can be attributed to all of this. But the one that makes me most aware is, unlike you guys who have this, wonderful weather, winter, spring, we have Hamatan. We don't have winter. Yeah, we have Hamatan. We have raining season.
okay.
And Hamatan is when it's very cold and dry, like your leaves go very dry, it's dusty, and everywhere is really dry, the plants turn brown and all. And this normally starts from end of November till December, then the beginnings of January. All right. And this is how I grew up as a child, knowing that, oh, I need a lip balm or
Mm.
something on my lips and all. But lately, the entire of December, you might not experience that. You might be seeing it even late January lately. And this is something that has made me come to realize that, yes, the clearing of trees, the sand filling of the ocean, the agricultural practices, the illegal mining operations, this
Mm,
thing is really changing our ecosystem. And whilst we do not see it as a problem today, it's really going to affect us in the future. That's my that's the most way I've become aware of this in our environment. Yeah.
mm. One of the things that I would also say, just with respect to the theme of this discussion around game jams and the role of game jams, is that I think in this sense, the language that we're choosing to speak, to use to speak, to engage, the dialect is actually gaming, right? And
Mm.
then through gaming, we are opting to say, make statements, to communicate messages through that interactive media of gaming, be it through narratives, be it through visuals. I mean, one of the things for me that I've been inspired to do, mentoring one of the groups that I'm working with, is I've begun to reflect on what would a social media platform for climate justice look like. When one considers that social media is a behavior modeling tool, and when you engage with social media, there's a button there that says follow. What would it look like if that button said lead? What would it look like if there was a button that said mobilize as opposed to connect?
Mm.
So when one thinks around the role of the Mzansi Climate Game Jam, specifically as a critical game thinking game jam, where we critically look at what the theme that we're engaged with, for me, it's inspired me to have to consider that alternate climate future and what are the tools that we would require to bring awareness to the issue, facilitate mindset shifts, and promote behavior changes.
Mm. Yeah, if I can come in on that, Msolisi, in terms of promoting behavior, there's a wonderful book called Games Agency as Art. It's by an academic called C.T. and Nguyen. And he proposes that really it's the only art form where agency and action is the art, right?
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what makes them so powerful and so interesting, is that people here are making games that are telling people you are in this position and you have to think about it. You are in this position and you have to do something. So it makes you interrogate your own agency, because a lot of the time it's like, where's climate change? Oh, Michael doesn't need to buy lip balm, but that's the thinking of it. Or Zama isn't prepared for the snow day. But as
Hmm.
soon as you're in the game, your agency changes in how you interact with it and how you have to think about it. So yeah, it's a really fascinating book, and it's really been. I've seen it in this game jam. I've seen it with how the designers are thinking about what they're doing to the player and what
Mm.
agency they're asking their player to enact. There you go. Thanks, Michael.
Then
Yeah,
questions.
I also
Yep.
dropped the link for the book. For everyone watching, I've dropped the link to the book in the comment section as well, so you can check it out. Thanks for sharing that, Karen. Yeah.
Oh.
I'll also like to contribute to that. There's a book called From Cradle to Cradle. It's one of the source material really for me that's brought to the forefront things that I didn't know and or consider. And there's really three factors that I've come across during this game jam um, that have come into focus in terms of considering the issue around climate justice and what that looks like. And that is really ecology, economy, and equality. So I've then been prompted to ask the questions to myself while engaged in the game jam. What does justice look like where the economy is concerned? What does justice look like where ecology is concerned? And what does justice look like where equality is concerned? So for me, those are some of the questions that this game jam has prompted me to ask myself and explore finding a response in certain instances funny, creating a meme such as pass the buck, um, which I'll share later. But those are some of the things that I've asked myself during this game jam. And I'd love for our panelists to kind of share what questions come to the fore or answers if there are any.
Hmm. That's a tough one.
We're here
Yeah,
for exactly that, yeah?
yeah, that's a tough one. Um, but from my own end, I think those three E's, I love that there are three E's. I think
Mm,
those three E's you've brought are very exciting. Because in the early 2020s, I used to work with Ambitious Africa, and that was like a civil organization for getting youth to be more involved in the social change we want. And I can tell for certain the interest is there, the economy and
Mm,
the psychology is a huge blocker for youth. Because people don't want to use, for example, when we got to Kenya this year, we saw that the polythene bags are banned, but that's
mm,
not the case here in Nigeria. Just recently, the government banned the use of styrofoam packs, if I'm not wrong. I think that's what they are called, those white
mm,
packs for selling
mm,
food and other things. And there was quite a bit of an uproar because we were used to it. And it's not that we don't want to change, but then what are the alternatives, right? What are the alternatives? Are they readily accessible?
mm,
And and these are the huge blockers a lot of youths are facing. Like I mentioned, people want to be a part of the solution, but a majority of our youth are deeply burdened with the problem solving of everyday life, which is where the economy comes in. And that is a huge issue that I think if we can tackle, we'll need to really, really look into. Because everyone who travels out as well, you see, they tend to adapt to the ecosystem they are in, to the environment they are in. Where, for example, in Kenya, we were not using any of those bags, we're reusing any item we use to buy stuff. Whereas in Nigeria, it's like for every purchase, there's a new bag you are receiving and then you dispose it. So the environment also comes in, the psychological perception of the people in the environment, the economy, because people with more financial resources don't even tend to do some things. Of course, when they do, it has high impact, like generators and all those stuff. Yeah. But if
mm,
we're looking at engaging the low end youth as well, because the more financial resources they have, it looks like the more waste they create Now we're having data centers, for example, that is putting a strain on our usage and need for electrical power. So there needs to be education on both ends, but the way
Mm.
you've listed it out is great, and it looks like we need to tackle each at a go at the same time. Yeah.
That's true. Balance is a key factor in terms of being responsive to the challenges of climate justice and or injustice. But with that said, Zama, I know from your journalistic background, of late we've read of instances where um, communities have had to rise up because their lands are being threatened and being required for development and mining, but they're pushing back on that. And I know in South Africa, we've recently begun to have such experiences. And I imagine in Nigeria, you may be accustomed to them in terms of you being an oil nation.
So, from my perspective, and like you're saying, listen, there's lots of issues with land, but it's also, I think, I look at it as a person looks and feels convenient or inconvenienced. To me, throughout the game jam, what has really come out is that development and forward momentum, a convenience to the people means inconvenience to the world and to the earth.
Mm.
So I think we need to, as a people, try and figure out what is more important. Like Michael is saying, getting a new plastic bag with every single purchase instead of the inconvenience, I guess, of having one bag and just reusing it over and over again and
Mm.
carrying it with you and being in the presence of mind to say, but I don't need a million trillion packages. I can do with just the one. And that's like a one-to-one person thing. And we need to start what has really come out to me is that each individual person needs to understand that climate justice and injustice is a self agency thing. It's one little thing that you do that has a massive impact when everybody does that one little thing.
Mm.
So I don't always need to have a brand new shirt. I don't always need to have something wrapped in cellophane. I don't always need to have, you can pick a fruit that isn't coming in a plastic bag. You can literally wear something out until it's in rags. And then when it is in rags, ask yourself, what happens after this? Does it
Mm.
have another use? Or does it just go in the bin? Because I think we haven't thought about what happens when I put something in a bin. And that I feel where we are has been a combination of that and to a large degree justice and injustice when we personalize them. I feel like we can start to find the answers but also start asking the right questions.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally agree on that. I totally agree on that, and that is really exciting. So I wanted to also ask, the jam has started, and there's a showcase coming up. Zaman did mention some things that she got from it. So from the participants, because I saw there were a couple of people who have already partaken, and this was also very much like a collaboration between two continents. That was very exciting to see. Yeah. So what were those differences in terms of perspective, looking at the African jammers and those jammers from the Netherlands? What were those differences in perspective that you were able to highlight, as well as what are some of the outcomes you can share? I know there's a showcase coming on the 5th of July. I've registered, I'm going to be there. But what was also some of the outcomes you identified? Yeah.
so I've noted something quite interesting, and I mean, it's not an outcome yet, but there's certainly a different kind of ludo literacy between the South African participants and the Dutch participants. And in some ways, it became a little bit problematic at times because some of the speakers from the Netherlands would speak about this board game, that board game, this thing. Board games are expensive. Most South Africans have never engaged with them in the kind of way that they're speaking about. But then on the other hand, there comes a fresh approach to thinking about games. That not having this canon and Ludo literally, like, you don't know, you never played a PlayStation for your whole life, like some of the Dutch participants and stuff like that. But thinking about it in a fresh way becomes really, really interesting. And I think what's been nice is to share that between the two different parties. So one of the Dutch teams is making a LARP, which is such a Northern European style of game. We don't really do LARPing here, but then we have a board game that's kind of recycled found objects that have now been used as something else, which I don't think the Dutch would think about doing. So seeing that different kind of ludo literacy, but that ultimately playfulness still wins at the end of the day, right? They're both playable sets of things, they're different knowledge systems, and it's just been such a nice thing to see those knowledge systems interact and see them engage with each other. And I think the organizers should be congratulated for kind of highlighting that and bringing it out. It's been really, really exciting to see.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I really love that. And Lacey?
So, so I think, to Kieran's point, having set out to deliberately design the game making session and the game jam itself to be collaborative, and drawing from diverse participants, we would have loved actually for there to be more cross pollination. But I think there are also limits. So one of the things that's very apparent is that yes, we have limits because of as much as technology brings us together, it also, in a sense, um, keeps us apart. So the interactions primarily happen in presentation and review of the actual games that are being played. But what's tremendous and what's amazing about that is that now there's a cross cultural exchange. For instance, the way that Europeans engage with animals and treat animals is very different in an African context, where we would use animals for some of our ritual rites and practices from a cultural perspective and point of view. So when you then engage your counterpart, your global north counterpart, and ask them to consider that your relationship with an animal, say it is a cow, is different to the relationship that they otherwise would have. And what I've found is that it's been a positive, one, very open to the other perspective, the other considerations that need to be made. So it's been emboldening the creative process, I feel. It's given us juxtapositions. It's forced us to think outside of the
Mm.
box, and in that sense, the narratives that we are getting are narrative that we otherwise wouldn't get. We challenge the dominant narratives and reflect cross-cultural exchange between participants. So in that sense, that we had set out to be a goal and that we've actually achieved.
Wow, that's really, really exciting. A lot of things have been said here, and I'm really looking forward to the showcase. For everyone who's watching, I'm bringing this up on the screen. So there's going to be a closing showcase on the 5th of July by 10 South African time. For you to register, I've dropped the link in the comments. So just go register, book your seat to see what has been developed from this program, which I find very exciting, the Mzansi Climate Justice Game Jam, where game developers in Africa and game developers and creators in the Netherlands work together over a period of time after going through a series of sessions, activities to come up with ideas, game prototypes to tackle this theme, this challenge. Yes. And yeah, so I have to ask right now. This has really been exciting, and I love that the game jam approach was used. I also love that cultural exchange. That's very cool.
Mm.
As Kieran said, I've also realized this when two people from different cultures are working together, the perspective of the world is always different, and that is the beauty of exchanges. You get to open your mind to other possibilities, right? And that is something that is really exciting. So, I don't know, what else would you love to share with everyone? We've shared the showcase. What other things would you love to let everyone knows? Are there also going to be like follow-ups after the showcase? I think that's one key thing we're always particular about. When these projects come out, what is the next step? Yeah.
I think first I would like to give credit to the Creative Industries Fund of the Netherlands, who are the National Cultural Fund in the Netherlands, and the donor, and Internet Teapot, who are the custodians and the stewards of this project and initiative and have brought us all together. With respect to the plan and the next steps, really it's to engage with stakeholders such as yourself, Africa Communicate, to provide a platform for us to showcase. We're in good company in that sense, because one of the things that I can speak to is that we'll be on the GWare platform. So we'll definitely be on the GWare platform, where our audience can get an opportunity to have to play and engage the games, as well as exploring opportunities to be on other platforms such as the Josie Game Fest, as well as Playtopia. We'll see, because different opportunities have different modalities. But with respect to next steps, we definitely have plans afoot. We've been invited to speak. So watch out for announcements that will be made off of our digital platform, our website. We're posting off of LinkedIn. We're engaging through the website. So please feel free, engage us on the website, and you'll see what's next there.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And I must say, you guys deserve a round of yes. Before I do let you go, though, I just have to follow up with Kieran very quickly on the upcoming jam, because this session was really about jams and how jams are bringing together that change. So,
Yeah.
the is connected, and Lizzie mentioned the Joburg Game Fest. That is something also exciting. So yeah, is this? I just have one question. This is this open to all Africans or just South Africans as well? And that goes back to you, Zolisi, as well. We need more within Africa, intra Africa competitions, collaboration. Yeah. So is this open to everyone as well, Kiran? Because this jam is coming up on the 10th of July, and by next week we'll be in July. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean it's a student game jam, but we're totally happy to have students from anywhere in Africa participating. It started when I was lecturing at WITS. Some of my colleagues started it during COVID to kind of go, well, students aren't interacting with each other, and it's sort of grown from there and exists in its own right now. But yeah, everyone's welcome. I mean, obviously, our main campus, we're having 2 days that are in person for those who can attend, and that's in Johannesburg. But otherwise, everyone's welcome to join the Campus Game Jam. We're mostly on Instagram. There you go. And we've got lots of nice prizes. And what's really great is this year we're getting a lot of support from the studios in South Africa who are like, okay, this is young talent. Let's really put some money behind it. And also, what's really nice for me is I've handed it over to some former students of mine who've graduated, and they're actually running it. So now it's kind of student, young led, and they're doing an amazing job with what they're putting together. So it's really exciting. And feel free to register. There is a link in this Instagram, in the link tree. There should be a registration link there. But yeah, it'll actually be really great. And even if it doesn't happen this year, Michael, I'm going to come back to you for next year, and you can put me in touch with colleges, universities, and then we can get everyone on board.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. I have shared the link to the Instagram page on the comment section so you can have a look at that. And yes, once more, don't forget the closing ceremony, the closing showcase for the Mzazi Climate Justice Game Jam is happening on the 5th of July. The link is also in the comment section. So please, please, please make sure you are there for it. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really nice having you all. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Just have a lovely evening. Yeah. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Wow. That was interesting, right, Faith?
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. I love that a lot of thought was put into it. They're really intentional about the kind of outcome they want from, the jam and the entire process, and, the transcultural exchange of information and all of that. So yeah, quite amazing.
Yes, it must have been a lot. And I love the exchange. For me, I think exchanges are one thing I'm very keen about right now because we've been doing things a particular way. I think it's time for all of us, whichever field, to start challenging the way we do things. Perhaps because as we know, the way we do things, the systems, the process always influence the outcome. And so if we need different outcomes, it's time for us to start exploring new ways. And that exchange is an opportunity for people to learn and grow. And that's really exciting. So I think we'll come to the wrap of the Africa Challenge, right? Um, yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's not definitely not going to. It's definitely.
Yeah, I can hear
You can hear me, yeah?
you loud and clear.
I'm sorry. I think my internet is acting up. But yeah, it's definitely not ending here or today. It's an ongoing conversation. It's something that it's a conversation we're always going to be having. And I know that, the data and the information we've exchanged here will be applied to, our creative processes going forward. So I mean, this was just like, a short kind of spotlight moments, but the Africa Challenge is on. We would always have conversations around creating positive impact and social change. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I'm going to wrap up with a video, and it's I think it sums up the whole idea of the Africa, which once more, if you don't know, stands for Evolve Africa. It is a challenge, a challenge to every creative to go out there. I think the first day Faith said that like you should be able to give back. You should want to leave a legacy, to give
You
back to your
should. Yeah.
influence. We have amazing jams happening. Since today was also focused on jams, the Jiwe Game Jam, which was done in partnership with like Isuku Games, the Nairobi Game Development Center, Weza Interactive, and so many more. Also, just recently wrapped up. There was the Awala Game Jam that happened recently as well. And even our own Echoes Game Jam, which was spearheaded by the Goethe Institute, wrapped up. The final phase wrapped up just at Lagos Games Week. And it's all about exchange, it's all about working together to build a change. So wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you are doing, your work has more impact than you know. It influences the site. If you're just building shooting and killing games, trust me, even that has impact on the users. And as an African, it's time for us to solve our own problems, right? We have our unique way of living, and therefore lasting solutions, just like mobile money, which is one thing that always comes out in the fintech space. It's worked in Kenya more than anywhere in the world, right? It's an innovation that came from out of Africa. Let's also start thinking of our problems. Let's also start thinking of solutions to our problems. And let us challenge ourselves to stand up. And with that, I think the game I'm going to use is one that has challenged the narrative of every African. It has spoken to every individual out there, splitting people, like splitting them into two. And can you guess what that game is? Faith, can you guess what that game is? Well,
I'm
guys,
very intrigued to know the game. I'm all in.
yes, and that's the recent game from a South African game studio called Yamaka, which is related.
What is fun about an abandoned warehouse, Trev?
That's right, you got nothing to prove, sis. No matter what they say.
Okay. What's this all about?
Treaties were signed, promises made and broken. Is it stealing to take back what was stolen?
Stolen? Who is stealing them?
Us?
It's time to get out of there.
Let me introduce a friend of mine. Smart, agile, and will let you look into places with the tightest security.
I could probably bench press every one of you.
The locksmith strikes again. Hold on!
Listen, are you having second thoughts?
Nope. Just hoping you won't get me killed.
Yeah.
I know what you and your little crew are doing.
Nobody threatens my family or my friends and gets away with it. So we are going to do whatever it takes to take back Africa's belongings, and we're going to do it together.
Applause, 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 applause.
Yeah, definitely. I think
That
yeah,
was amazing. That was
yeah,
great. I mean, we do
yeah,
not want to have the whole Robin Hood conversation, but I
definitely.
think this
We're
is
not having that yet. We're
but
not
I
having that yet at all.
but I
Yeah,
think it's really great. I think it's really great the fact that they're shedding more light on Africa's heritage and stolen cultural items and all of that. It's really amazing. It shows creativity, it shows ownership of our tradition, our culture, and our history.
yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. If there's anything this game has done, it's that it has brought up that conversation, challenging people to really look, what do you think? What do you feel is right or wrong, right? And conversations like these are very much important for us. So whatever you think of the game, it's totally, totally fine. It's very welcome. We are not looking for a one mind, one view ecosystem. You get, we are open to comments, feedback, and this is all about African stories being told from one perspective. And if you have another one, that's cool. But this is us, this is Africans coming to the fore and saying their story. And it has just go online, check out Related, and be the judge for yourself. Wish list that game winner. Wish list the game, right? Before you judge or comment, go and check out the game before you comment and judge. And with that, we'd say bye. It was really exciting spending time with you all. And
Very
it was nice
exciting.
hosting this with you as well, Faith. So,
Yes.
any word to everyone?
Yeah, final words. The conversations definitely do not end here. Like I said, we're constantly going to have conversations around, Evolve Africa, challenging ourselves, stepping up, taking ownership of, the stories we want to tell, and being, uh, you could, you could be on both ends of the spectrum. The deepest narcissism or the best altruism, but just give back to society, right? Create social impact, create positive change to the world around you. It matters. I mean, it may be one life, two lives, but it's going to create a ripple effect, and everyone's going to see it at the end of the day.
Yeah, Definitely. And I love that last line. It might be one life, two lives. It matters. It's not a number game. It's not a, hey, I've done for 1 million people. So, and for me,
Exactly.
I'll just wrap up with that change you are looking for. Really, it can start with you. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely night. Bye.